In 1955, a bomber took off from a Texas runway carrying something no aircraft had ever carried before, a live nuclear reactor. Its crew wore lead-lined flight suits. Below them, a shielded cockpit 10 inches thick. This was not fiction. This was the United States Air Force. This is the story of the Convair NB-36 the world's only aircraft to fly with an operating nuclear reactor on board. America wanted a bomber that never had to land, one that could stay airborne for weeks, powered not by fuel but by atomic energy. To prove it was possible, engineers didn't build a simulator. They built a flying reactor and put it inside a bomber. The year was 1946. The Cold War was just beginning, and the United States feared falling behind the Soviet Union in strategic air power. Long-range bombers of the era were limited by fuel. A nuclear-powered aircraft, in theory, could fly across the globe without ever refueling. In 1946, the US Army Air Forces launched the NEPA project, nuclear energy for the propulsion of aircraft. By 1951, NEPA evolved into a far more ambitious effort. The Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Program, or AMP-8. Convair, the manufacturer of the giant B-36 Peacemaker, was chosen to explore whether a reactor could actually fly. Convair selected an existing B-36 airframe, serial number 515712, to become the test platform. The aircraft had already been damaged in a tornado. Rather than scrap it, engineers gave it a radical new purpose. It would be reborn as the NB-36, nicknamed the Crusader, the only nuclear reactor carrying aircraft in history. The most dramatic change was invisible from the outside. An 11-ton lead and rubber-shielded crew capsule replacing the cockpit. One half the turd, and inside sat 4 crew members, 2 pilots, a flight engineer, and a nuclear engineer monitoring the reactor's every heartbeat. The heart of the experiment was the aircraft shield test reactor, a 1-megawatt air-cooled nuclear reactor. It was mounted in the aircraft's rear bomb bay, sealed behind its own concrete and lead shielding. Crucially, the reactor never powered the engines. It flew purely to test radiation shielding and measure how it behaved in real flight. 6 thick windows of leaded glass, each up to a foot thick, allowed the pilots to see the runway ahead. Engineers had to solve a problem no aviation team had faced before. How do you protect a human crew from radiation at 25,000 feet? The aircraft's radio-controlled dual retractable landing gear and reinforced structure allowed it to carry nearly 12 tons of extra shielding weight. On September 17, 1955, the NB-36 took off for the first time, becoming the first aircraft ever to fly with a nuclear reactor aboard. The reactor was not yet active on this flight. Engineers first needed to confirm the aircraft itself could safely carry the load. Weeks later, the reactor went critical in flight for the first time. For the next year, it flew nearly 50 test missions. Every flight, a modified Boeing C-97 trailed behind it, carrying armed paratroopers ready to secure the reactor if the bomber ever crashed. Inside that escort plane, soldiers trained to parachute in and cordon off the crash site before local authorities even arrived. Ground crews carried radiation detectors before every flight, scanning the runway and surrounding fields for any sign of leakage. Test flights were carefully mapped to avoid populated areas, with pilots flying wide circles over sparsely inhabited Texas terrain. Between 1955 and 1957, the NB-36 completed 47 flights and logged over 215 hours in the air, 89 of them with the reactor running. No flight ever used the reactor to power the aircraft's engines. Its sole purpose was studying shielding, radiation leakage, and crew safety. The data gathered proved invaluable and also revealed a harsh truth. Effective shielding was extraordinarily heavy. A fully nuclear-powered bomber, engineers calculated, would need shielding so massive it might never leave the ground efficiently. By 1950, the NB-36's job was done. It had proven a reactor could fly, but not that it could power an operational bomber. In March 1961, President Kennedy's administration officially cancelled the entire aircraft nuclear propulsion program, citing cost and limited strategic value. The NB-36 itself was scrapped in 1958, its reactor removed and studied, its airframe cut apart for materials. The NB-36 never dropped a bomb, never fired a shot, and never even used its reactor for propulsion. Yet its legacy is undeniable. It proved that shielding a nuclear reactor for human flight was possible, and that the weight penalty made it impractical for its era. The data it produced quietly influenced later work in reactor shielding, nuclear safety protocols, and radiation-hardened materials. And produced CRIAT, Everything you've just seen is real history. But one question has lingered for decades. What if the AMP program had not been cancelled? From this point forward, we enter speculation, grounded in real 1950s engineering, but never built. This is the hypothetical continuation. Had funding continued, the next step would likely have been the X-6, a fully nuclear-powered bomber prototype based on the B-66 airframe. Engineers would have faced the same unsolved problem: shielding heavy enough to protect a crew, yet light enough to fly efficiently. Some proposals imagined unshielded reactors for cargo or reconnaissance drones, accepting radiation risk in exchange for near unlimited range. Realistically, most historians agree the program would likely have stalled by the mid-1960s as IBMs made airborne nuclear bombers strategically redundant. Today, nuclear propulsion research has shifted from bombers to space, with NASA and DARPA studying nuclear thermal rocket engines. Modern shielding materials are lighter and more efficient than anything available in 1955. But the core weight problem still hasn't fully disappeared. The B-36 that once carried a reactor has been replaced in the nuclear deterrent role by missiles, submarines, and stealth bombers. The NB-36 Surge was never a weapon. It was a question: could humanity safely carry the power of the atom into the sky? The answer in the end was yes, but at a cost too heavy, too dangerous, and too impractical to ever fly operationally. Only one aircraft in history ever flew with a working nuclear reactor on board. It flew 50 times, and then it vanished into scrap metal. But its story remains one of the boldest experiments of the Cold War, a reminder of how far humanity was willing to go